administrators do in fact engineer failover redundancy, but you've got to plan it.
So in your schematic up there, you showed 70 centimeter path and
Yes.
a meter. What about 1296? It's starting to take off in certain other areas as one of the frequencies to use a lot of bandwidth for data transmission. Can you address that?
I think you should form a 1296 working group.
It's expensive. It's expensive. You can buy a used router for $25, and if you want to go whole hog, a high gain antenna, for another $25, and you're there. The entire hardware suite.
I got my routers at Goodwill. $4.95.
$4.95. Yeah.
Now there are trade-offs with everything you buy, but you want something. Hopefully, you want to pick something. The less expensive targets would be the one where there's lots and lots of hardware floating around.
So that's 2 meters and 440.
Yeah. No, actually, that's still low volume amateur radio equipment is expensive compared to commercial 5 gig and 2.5 gig.
So this has got a 500 milliwatt radio in it, 5.8 gigahertz built into the horn, 25 dB gain dish, power over Ethernet. It's weatherproof. It's designed to be deployed outside, and in fact, it's made for the wireless ISP market. So it's designed to be installed and never touched again. $80.
If that's very directional and it has to be very high in a terrain like this,
but it's only one of the options in that.
Yeah, it's only one of the. Let me finish. And by the way, 1296 is line of sight and direction. You're going to have all the same issues with 1296. So that's why I think we need to work in multiple parts of the spectrum. So what I'm talking about here, and this doesn't imply that every node is configured this way, but each node would have some combination of either 5.8 or 2.4 gigahertz microwave, 70 centimeter, both of those running mesh protocols. There are 2 companies now that make radio cards that you can put in a router that will do, they'll do up to about 20 megabits per second on 70 centimeter. They're designed to tune the amateur TV part of the 70 centimeter band. And so you can run exactly the same software, exactly the same routing protocols, and get modest bandwidth. And the 5.8 gig radios, these will do like 100 megabits.
What are you using in Seattle and Boston?
Hang on a second. I'll get to that in just a second. And those 70 centimeter cards are actually 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi cards with downlink on. So the router thinks that it's a 2.4 gig Wi-Fi card, and really the radio it's 70 centimeter. And the reason for, obviously 70 centimeter. Now we're talking near line of sight. We don't have huge coverage, but still, the trees don't automatically kill us. So we can have some of the virtues of mesh, reasonable bandwidth big enough. I mean, 20 megabits, you can push live video, you can do those sorts of things. I'm running the same protocol, so it's an IP network. Your machines have IP addresses, and anything you can run over an IP network, you can run over this network. And then I think, because obviously, we don't have to tell anybody here, mountains, trees, valleys, we need something that will give us broad coverage, and we're going to give up bandwidth for that. And so I do think that packet at 2 meters and 70 centimeters still has a place in this new world. And one of the things I don't know the answer to, and I'm hoping that somebody who understands packet a lot better than I do, which is almost everybody in the room, I don't know the answer to how we integrate a packet network with an IP-based network. That's a project that I would love for somebody to take.
Run IP over packet.
You can run IP over packet. It's kind of a train wreck, but
it's slow.
Yeah. But it may be that the packet network is I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on that, but somebody who understands packet can take that.
The question was
the production systems in the Seattle area and Boston, what's their backbone? Is it microwave or 70?
The Austin folks are, I believe, still mostly using Linksys routers, so they're running 2.4 gig on these Linksys equipment. The Seattle folks, I know, are using 5.8 gig for their backhaul between the three main hub sites, and I believe they have both 5.8 and 2.4 gig radios. I don't think any of them are using 77 gig.
Boston sits in a bowl of mountains to the west and south, and they don't have that many trees.
Yes, they have some geographic advantages. As does the Seattle area. They have trees, obviously, but they also have high population density surrounded by mountains. Frankly, Charlottesville is relatively, just for the city of Charlottesville and a big chunk of Albemarle County, we're relatively advantaged in the same way. Lots of trees, but we've got high ground all around the city. We're a little bit out. I think I've already covered this part. For my initial deployment in Albemarle, my plan is to use a combination of ubiquity gear. These are both ubiquity radios over here, and microtik gear. I definitely want to deploy a multi-vendor network here, both because single vendor networks have single points of failure. I also think that doing a multi-vendor network opens up more opportunity for experimentation, and in my vision would be that we would run a network that during the vast majority of time it's not being used for an actual emergency or a drill or a public safety event, would be wide open for amateurs in the region to experiment with and learn about these sorts of technologies. And then if we needed for an emergency, we'd flip a switch and kick the experimenters off and use it for the emergency. And multi-vendor drives me to the open source OpenWRT rather than using the software that comes on the vendors, the proprietary software that comes from the vendors, which multiple vendors will interoperate to a certain extent, but not enough. And so OpenWRT is the basis for the broadband handnet stuff in Austin. It's the base loads that they're using, and OLSR is the level that they're using. So that provides some compatibility over the long run with them. And then I'm going to talk about what is about to happen, and then I'm going to shut up and let somebody else talk. None of this is deployed outside of my shack, and you'll notice there's a string on the top of the Omni. This is to hang this node from a curtain rod in my shack, and the dish usually sits in the spare bedroom across the hall, and that is my mesh network.
And his wife walks on down the hallway tossing sandwiches.
Yes. Yeah. But I'm happy to say that both the University of Virginia emergency preparedness folks and the city county emergency preparedness folks are enthusiastic supporters of amateur radio as a partner in the emergency response for the region. And the UVA folks, I happen to work at UVA, so I have a little bit of an inside track. But the UVA folks have agreed to let me put a radio on the top of the hydrogen physics lab, which is on what we call Observatory Hill. If you look on the map, it's called McPherson. And the corner observatory is at the top of the hill here. The guy who runs the observatory will not let me put an antenna on the observatory. It's a historic site, and he spent 10 years trying to put it back the way it looked when McPherson built it. And so he's not particularly interested in me putting antennas on it. But the hydrogen physics lab is down the hill just a little bit and has about a probably 50-foot tower, not a